Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Goud Crowd podcast, or I guess live radio show. You can check us out on X and it's at Goud 4 Utah, and also it's on YouTube at Utah Mainstream Media. So we'll be live in both places, and today we will take call-ins. So if you want to call in at any time, and I think there should be a thing running across the screen telling you the call-in number, feel free to call in because I want to hear from you. We are going to talk about election results in Salt Lake County particularly, because I think Salt Lake County is really the key to Utah. It's our biggest county by far. I think it has about a third of the population. It is the biggest blue county in the state. And you have a few states that are like this, that have one really big county that dominates the state. The Democrats are very smart, so they target those big counties, and then they use them to turn the entire state blue. And we're at risk of that happening to us. And I just want to make sure that we talk through these results, and then we talk about ideas on how to make things better in the future. I'll just show you a map to start. Let me figure out how to share. Oh my gosh, share screen. And here we go. Okay. So Heidi Hatch at KUTB actually posted this map showing the trends, like which areas went bluer, which areas went redder. If you notice, the one that went bluer was Salt Lake County. And so that's why I think like we have, and you have to ignore, if you can see all the tabs on my screen, please ignore them. But so this is why I think it's important that we actually talk about the results and then what we do going forward. So let me kind of walk you through some things here. Overall, in terms of the local elections, Salt Lake County was what I would call just a disaster for Republicans. And this is despite an effort by the state Republican Party to actually focus on Salt Lake County, because they understand that this is an issue. And just so you know, I have some inside knowledge of this because I am on the Utah GOP State Central Committee. But despite those kind of concerted efforts, especially to focus on the west side, we still ended up losing a lot of county races, and we even lost a House seat in Salt Lake County. So now I want to start with something positive, though. And I don't know, some of you guys may know Representative Anthony Lubay. He represents House District 27, and so let me tell you about the results in that race. In 2020, he actually lost that race by 266 votes. In 2022, he won it by 67 votes. And this year, he won that race by 1,588 votes. So that's a really big margin, because there were a total of 13,656 votes that were cast in that district. So, but a huge change, right? And I think one of the questions, and I'm gonna say this, and then I want you to kind of remember this as we talk about some of the other results in Salt Lake County. But the thing to think about is what did Anthony do that turned what looked like a swing district into maybe an Anthony Lubay district or a red district? So, we can take that how it is. And I'll just tell you, I've actually worked with Representative Lubay. Last session, he and I worked on a bill, and it was to change the law around the duty to report child sex abuse for clergy members. So, oh, now you're saying my background is turned off. I don't know what just happened. Okay, I'm back. So anyway, we'll get back to that in a little while, but just keep bookmark that. And now let's talk about some of the other races. So this year, the Salt Lake County GOP actually lost the county mayor's race, right? the open at-large county council seat, the treasurer's race, and then also the recorder's race. And a couple of these are kind of interesting because the county mayor's race, it's a Democrat incumbent. It's Jenny Wilson. The the treasurer's race was a Republican. He did not run for re-election, so it was an open seat. It flipped Democrat. And then the recorder's race, I think I covered this in the last podcast we did, but it's Rochelle Hobbs. And she had sent out a flyer, an electioneering flyer with people's property tax notices, and she still won. So, that's just give you a sense of how kind of odd that is. Then I'll also note that the county assessor, Chris Stavros, won his race, but it was by about 1,000 votes. And in 2020, he actually won that race by 6,000 votes. So he had a drop in his winning margin. For Councilmember Dee Theodore, her total vote count was actually down. So in 2020, she actually won the race, I think, by 10,000 votes, and in 2024, she actually got 4,000 fewer votes, cutting that margin. So, so there's a concern here, right? At that county level, which has a lot of really important offices, we're just not winning. And in 2022, we actually lost all of the countywide races. So that included the sheriff's office, the district attorney, and the county clerk's race, which I ran for that, so I'm very familiar with that issue. And I'm wondering, I'm just wondering, like, what is going on here? Like, what is the issue, and what can we do to change it? Now, just a little bit more on this, that at-large county council seat strikes me as being extremely notable because there were multiple prominent moderate Democrats who openly endorsed and supported Rochelle Morris, the Republican nominee for that race. And she still ended up losing. Now, let me show you what the winner posted. I thought this was kind of interesting. So give me 1 second. Here we go. Okay. So Natalie Pinckney won that race. And so she posted and said that she had 100 plus community events, that her campaign knocked on 23,000 doors. They made 180,000 phone calls. 150,000 texts were sent, and they had 700 unique donors. I'm not as concerned about the number of unique donors as I am wondering about the doors knocked, the phone calls, and the text messages sent. And specifically, I am wondering what effort did the Salt Lake County GOP have compared to this? Like, did we also knock on thousands of doors? Did we she made almost 200,000 phone calls. That's huge. I mean, the difference between these two candidates was actually not that great. I think it was 6,000 or 7,000 votes. So this probably made a difference. And I'm just wondering if the Salt Lake County GOP was also leading similar efforts for our candidates. Now, I'm going to show you another piece from the Utah Democrats that I found kind of interesting. And this will show you kind of the effort that the Utah Democrats put into this in terms of coordinating their campaigns. So for them, they said they reached out to over 250,000 voters since May 1st of 2024. They had over 60,000 conversations, phone banking, texting, door knocking. And by the way, they're targeting not just Salt Lake County, but they're going all over the state and they're doing this. So I am just wondering, what are we doing in response to this? Are we making a similar effort? to reach out to voters where they are at their homes, or going and knocking on these doors, going and calling them, telling them why they should vote Republican? Or are we just, what are our counter efforts to this? So that's kind of a question that I have. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing this. Now, and I'm going to be honest with you, I don't actually know the answer to this in terms of what counter efforts we had. I can just tell you that when I ran in 2022, that I know people went and knocked on doors, but there wasn't a ton of coordination at the party level for that. There was some of it. Sometimes they'll do bang the drum events, but I think in order to hit 23,000 homes or 180,000 homes, whatever this looks like, it takes a lot more coordination than a couple bang the drum events. I mean, this is something that you're going to be doing every weekend over an extended period of time to be able to even come close to matching that. And so that's why I think this is actually a really important topic for us to have, is what do we do going forward? Okay. Now, let me just let me make a comparison here that I think could also give us some insight in terms of maybe why different candidates had different results. And so I'm going to go back to the Anthony Loubet example, and let me show you his campaign website. Let's see here, share screen. There we go. Okay. So this is Anthony Loubet's campaign. He has a very attractive, beautiful family here, but that's not what I'm interested in. Not in a bad way, but here is let's take a look at his legislation, and this is very. First of all, I think my point here though is this is a very issues-based candidate. He has multiple examples of legislation that he's passed. Not all of this isn't all particularly partisan one way or the other. A lot of it is about improving government and making it better for people. And it's stuff that people can talk about around their kitchen tables. And I'll talk about this one, HB 432. So I run the Utah Gay Straight Coalition, and a big issue that had popped up last year was, it's not just last year, but it's been going on for a while, is people are upset that clergy members don't have to report child sex abuse that they learn from a clergy member during confession. Or I'm sorry, they learn from a perpetrator of child abuse during confession. So there is a privilege that attached to that, your clergy penitent privilege. So my ultimate goal was to try to get rid of that privilege and to make it mandatory reporting. There are states that actually have that, like Texas, for example, does not give an exemption for the clergy penitent privilege. You have to actually report it if you're a clergy member and you learn that someone has abused a child. You have to go and report it to the authorities, appropriate authorities. Now, in what we did here is we made an improvement. And what the improvement did is it increased the incentive for clergy members to go and report if they voluntarily report if they learn about child abuse from the person doing it during a confession. And so this is legislation that it's not partisan. It passed unanimously, and before the bill was even proposed, I actually went with Representative Loubet and we met with Representative Angela Romero, who's a Democrat. And so this is like legislation that appeals to people of all political persuasions, really. Typically, just so you know, like the people that oppose this type of legislation, they're not opposed to the reporting requirement. It's more of I think a debate about the First Amendment protection for the free exercise of religion and what that means. So I don't want anyone to think that some people oppose it because they're bad people. It's more just a disagreement about what that constitutional right means for religions. So this is a very, anyway, the point being, this is a very issues-based website. It's a very issues-based candidate. And everybody could find something in his issues that they like and that they want to support. And I think when you see this, it shows you why he was able to expand his margins so much and really turn his district into what I would consider a pretty safe district at this point. Now, let me show you Rochelle Morris's website and just show you the issues here. So I'm gonna just talk about this. You can talk about financial responsibility, right? So are you seeing the new thing? I don't think you are. All right, let me try that again. Here we go. Okay, I guess I have to stop sharing and then reshare. So here is, you can see Rochelle Morris with her. This is financial responsibility. And I appreciate this, right? I want, my taxes are too high. I would like them lower, and I would like our government to stop wasting my money on all sorts of stuff that I don't want to pay for. So love it. Now, my criticism here would be that this is very generic. So she says she will bring her expertise to the council to ensure your hard-earned tax dollars are spent wisely and efficiently. As your representative on the Salt Lake County Council, she will prioritize responsible budgeting and work to eliminate government waste. Rochelle understands the importance of fiscal responsibility and will advocate for policies that promote transparency and accountability in county finances. Okay. That is very generic, right? And you can contrast that with what Representative Loubet has on his website. And I understand there's a little bit of a difference because Representative Loubet has been in office for 2 years. And so he can point to actual legislation he passed. But if a way Rochelle Morris could have done that as well is to actually point out issues in the budget or areas where she would cut. So for example, a big issue has been the number of deputy mayors that Mayor Jenny Wilson has. And these are people that make $200,000 to $300,000 a year. I think she has something like 6 or 7 deputy mayors. Most of those people could be fired. You know, they don't actually do anything that is worth that much money. And these are more political patronage jobs. And I know, for example, in 2020, Lori Stringham, part of her campaign was that she was going to eliminate the deputy mayors. People don't like it. That could have been something she put here. There are all sorts of areas in Salt Lake County's government that could be cut without real impacts on the things that people really want. And I think it would have been good to point those out in the website. And but I want to add, I don't think this is a criticism of just Rochelle Morris. There's more to this and we'll get to it, but that's just one example. Let me show you another one. And this is the county mayor's race with Aaron Ryder. Let me share this with you for a minute. Okay. There we go. Okay. Again, this is where this one is interesting. On the economy, the second sentence, she said, this mismanagement, so it's a mismanagement of the budget. I realize maybe not everyone's watching. So she says the county's financial stewardship is faltering with a $2 billion budget stretched to its limits year after year. This mismanagement risks jobs and compromises to the maintenance of our infrastructure. The focus must be on ways to improve the economy, not on ways to grow the county government. Okay, I totally agree with that. But I will say, I actually heard Aaron Ryder speak in person. And when she talked in person, she had these fantastic issues. That's not specified that well, unfortunately, on the website. But I'll just give you an issue I took away from that talk that she gave. She was talking about this idea of deferred maintenance, that Jenny Wilson, who's been in government for, an absurd amount of time. I want to say it's like 15 years. She's been in the county government in various positions and really is not that good because she's not a good county mayor. just wasting lots of money and not spending it where they actually should be spending it. One example is maintaining their buildings and their facilities. So one example that Aaron gave that I thought was fantastic is the jail. The current jail that we have is not at full capacity. Like, although I mean, you could paint that as a good thing because we don't want criminals, but the reason it's not at full capacity is not because people are not committing crimes. It's because it has not been properly maintained. So there are parts of it that apparently cannot be used because they weren't properly maintained. And so what I would say about that is that it was a great issue. She gave multiple examples where the county government has not properly maintained its buildings and its facilities. And what that has done is it means that those buildings have to be replaced faster than they otherwise would have been. And it means that our taxes are constantly going up to fund that because the government is not spending its money as it should be on actually maintaining its buildings. So it has a $2 billion budget, but instead of spending it on, the basics, so, they're spending it on cheese or, like the extras, chocolate. They're buying chocolate instead of just like meat, potatoes, rice, whatever you like to eat. And so I thought when I heard that, I had never heard that before. I thought that was a fantastic issue, but it's not on the website. And not everybody is going to be able to go out and hear you speak. She did make those points, to be fair to her, during the debate she had with Jenny Wilson, where I actually thought she did a really good job. And I don't think in that, I think Jenny Wilson just wasn't that good. But that's another example of issues. Like, I think I'm wondering if one issue is that our candidates need to have more specific issues that people can understand and they can talk about with their families and things like that. Now, I'll give you, deferred maintenance is not particularly a sexy issue, but it is critical when you're talking about a county government and what are its basic duties, right? I'll give you one more example of this. They're going to move the entire county complex because they didn't properly maintain the current buildings over there. So, I mean, in a normal time, we would think that's embarrassing, but for some reason in Utah, we reelect people who do that kind of stuff. Okay. Now, let me talk about, so that is kind of the comparison. And so just think about that. Anthony Lubbe, who expanded those margins and was able to turn a previously swing district into a red district, actually had very specific issues that he had worked on. The candidates who maybe weren't as successful, but we wanted them to be successful, didn't have those specific issues. And I don't just blame the candidates. I just want to make that clear. And that's what we're going to talk about next. I am wondering if part of our problem is that the candidates are not getting the support that they need from the party, both the county and the state party. So before I continue here, let me just say the phone lines are open. So if you want to call in, feel free to call in. And I'll just keep talking until people call in. Because
I think you missed my message, Goud. We have a caller.
Oh my God! Okay, let him in.
It's John, and he's got a question for you.
Okay.
Hang on. Let me unmute him. John, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Go ahead, fire away.
So, Goud, I've been listening to you, and I think there's some context to what you say that maybe goes back a ways. Back in 2020, the Republicans won a lot of races that they were not expected to win, and we haven't been able to keep that moving forward. The Democrats sort of took that and changed what they were doing, but we didn't seem to follow through on that. And so maybe we need to talk a little bit about the history of that. The other thing I think is important to understand is that it isn't Salt Lake County itself that prevents Republicans from winning. We had all of our several of our congressional members, our senator and our governor, all won their races in Salt Lake County. So there's something going on at the county level, I believe, that's keeping us from winning these county races. And I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on what happened in 2020, and what we can do to make those things better. As a question, just so you know, I was part of a group that was recruited by then county Republican Party Chairman Scott Miller to assist candidates. So a bunch of us who were somewhat subject matter experts, and we worked on helping with messaging and a number of things in 2020. So there was a lot that went on that time that showed that the party was supporting candidates in a way that they haven't done since then.
Okay. I have a question about this actually for you. I moved here in 2020, right? And I think it was in June 2020. And so I wasn't really involved that much with the party going into that 2020 election. Was the party leadership involved in talking to the press and getting issues out there? And I asked this because one of the things I was just going to talk about is I feel like our party leadership does not engage enough with the press. And I'm wondering if that's part of the problem here.
I think inevitably that is part of the problem. And the answer to your question is yes. The county party at that time got involved with a number of issues with the press directly. I know that the chairman during that election cycle went to the editorial boards of all the newspapers and did a number of things like that to try to bring some of these Republican issues to the forefront. In addition, we had a focus on helping candidates. So they put together a package of services that they would provide, including websites, messaging, lists and emails. And all of those things were intended specifically to assist the candidates in getting their message out, both to the public and to the media. And the party even took some things directly to other parts of the Republican Party. You had people who were supporting Mayor McAdams, and some of the party, I know, reached out and actually issued a video saying, hey, the people who are supporting Mayor McAdams who claim to be Republicans, here's some things that they've been responsible for. And that was an attempt to help Burgess Owens overcome. At the time, he was behind in the poll in the race. I don't know whether that was what got him elected, but it was certainly a direct response on the part of the party and the party leadership to some attacks on Burgess Owens by people who said they were Republicans but were supporting the Democratic mayor at that time.
Okay. And do you think for the county races that there was the messaging better in 2020? Because these would be all the same offices that were up in 2020 were up this year, right? And did you see like a difference in messaging this time around compared to last time?
Yes. Specifically, I know that the chairman and some of his volunteers sat down specifically with every candidate and asked them what the issues were that they saw. And they also looked at the news and said, okay, here's some issues that we are aware of that are happening that will affect the office to which you're running. And consequently, they asked me and others to help craft some messaging specifically for each candidate and the race that they were in. So, for example, we worked with there was a constitutional amendment related to municipal water that actually could have had an impact on the assessed value of property, because it affected whether or not there was a permanent water source. That constitutional amendment passed, but we worked with the assessor's candidate, the current assessor, for Stavros, to use that as an issue to talk about the importance of making sure that we have a permanent water source, because otherwise the value of the property would dramatically decrease. And this was related to most of the East Bench of Salt Lake County, and it would have really had a negative impact on the tax revenues and a negative impact on the ability of those folks to continue with their homes and businesses had that constitutional amendment not passed. So by saying, okay, that's out there, this is something this is how it impacts your race, Chris was able to use that to get people interested in the constitutional amendment, but also demonstrate that he was aware of the potential impact of that constitutional problem that was trying to be solved by that constitutional amendment. Now, gratefully, that amendment passed in 2020, and that issue's largely been solved. Well, there's a few lingering issues that we could talk about on another day, but that's largely been solved. But that's an example. There were others where we talked about East Side districts. We talked about what's going on in the canyons and what's going on in how is that impacting your neighborhoods, and those kinds of messaging meant that the people in those areas were aware that these candidates understood what was going on in the neighborhood and focusing specifically on those issues where their neighborhoods were being impacted directly. Some issues affect the whole county, but some just affect those particular areas, and it's important to demonstrate that we understand what those issues are and can speak to them, and that's what our candidates need to do.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I voted for Chris this time, but I have no idea. I looked at his website, I couldn't figure out a sexy issue that he ran on. I feel like I should remember something, right? And I'll say the same thing with Rochelle Morris. I can't name a specific issue, except I'll dig into issues. I will analyze. I'll be data driven. But nothing that's memorable is like, this is a specific thing I will do if you elect me.
Right.
And I wonder if that's what's missing here.
I certainly think that's one of the things that needs to happen, is that we need to have messaging that is focused on specifics. What are the issues that are important in these races, and how do we? And the other key is making sure that we're strategic about how we bring them up, so that we can use these messaging to get ahead of the opponents. And there was some debate about some of the issues that we have, and not every candidate wants to do exactly what they were asked to do, and that's fine. But just understand that we tried to help the candidates identify issues that were going to resonate with their citizens, and we won a number of races that we weren't supposed to win that year because of the effort that we put into trying to find that messaging and get it out there, and then get the candidates involved in going to the media and the members of the leadership of the party, going to the media with some of these issues, and working through that that channel as well, as much as possible, to let them see that we knew specifically what we wanted to do, and what these candidates wanted to do when they got elected. Yeah, and
sorry, I just got a little message, and this is true, but I think that's actually why Trump won, was about issues, and it was really a domination of the issues, right? Because even the polling still showed after he won that he was underwater in terms of likability, but I think he won the election because he dominated on the issues that mattered to people. And I think on the local level, it's the same thing, right? Especially if you're challenging an incumbent, I think this is true. You have to give people a reason to vote for you and change and change horses. And what you're talking about is like getting these issues and being able to tell people, like, first of all, I understand the office. I understand what concerns you, and then here's how I will change it if I'm elected. That'll make it better for you. And maybe that was missing in some of these races this time.
I think it was. I'm also, I think it's interesting that we were successful in 2020, but those same people were not around in 2022 for a variety of reasons, and we didn't have the same success in 2022, and that's unfortunate because the 2022 races in the county were the ones that were important for law enforcement. There's the district attorney and the sheriff, and the one for our election integrity and the county clerk. And you did a good job of trying to get some of those issues out in the clerk's race that you ran in 2022, but we didn't have as much success at sort of messaging and pushing those messages out as we had in 2020.
Yeah, no, I can tell you as the actual candidate, it was a very difficult race because they could attack me as being, whatever, an election denier, and then what was a threat to democracy, which on some level is really offensive because I'm a veteran, and so I think, like, when you say that, it's just like, I don't think you can be a veteran and be a threat to democracy. It's just really offensive. But it was hard to counter what was going on because the press was controlling how we responded. Like, for example, I in that race, I seem to have been the real target. Like the press seemed especially focused on me, and like the Salt Lake Tribune would run op-eds almost weekly about me. Oh, he's a horrible person, whatever, threat to democracy, is going to destroy the country. And then they would only let me respond once every 30 days. But now I'm wondering if there's actually a little bit of a change that's happened because Elon Musk took over X and turned it into a free speech platform. And that really then begins to empower candidates to respond. And so one of the things I was thinking about on this actually is that, like, I'll just give you an example. Rochelle Morris, who got more than 200,000 votes, she only has 389 followers on X. And maybe part of what we need to do as a party is to encourage more people to move to X because, we can actually get them real information and not propaganda. And it also gives the candidates a mechanism to be able to respond when they're attacked by their opponent or attacked by the press. And maybe that helps going forward.
Well, I'm not an expert on social media, but that certainly makes sense to me. X is a platform where we can get our message out. There are limitations to the length, but that just requires you to be to work a little harder at getting your message pared down to the core. But I think that's a good idea. I don't think you give up on the media, but I do think having a platform like that is an opportunity to get these messages out in an uncensored way. The other thing that was quite effective at that time, and something that can be effective now, is emails and text messages, which if you work hard at developing those lists, they can be quite effective as well. So there's a variety of ways to get around the lack of willingness on the part of the press sometimes to carry your side of the story. But all of those require some effort on the part of the party to reach out and say, okay, these are the issues that are important to us, and to call the press out on it. That's one of the ways the party could be helpful, is when the press is unwilling to carry both sides of the story. They ought to make that a story, and they could do that by having the party chair, basically go on X and actually go into the editorial board and say, why are you not treating us fairly? You need to tell both sides of the story. And so if the party would call out the media when they act that way, then that puts the media on notice that people are watching them, and that tends to make them a little fairer icing. So there's a variety of things that can happen using text messages, using emails, using X, and actually, the party itself saying we're not going to put up with our candidates being attacked without calling people out. And so that requires some courage and some intrepidity. But if the party chairs would do that, that would go a long way towards helping people.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much for calling in, John. I appreciate it. And we appreciate your insights. That's really good insights, and hopefully we as a party can take away some of this and improve going forward. So I appreciate the call in. Okay. Okay, I will, so I think that gives us a good sense of some of the changes that have happened, because as John was talking about, in 2020, the party actually won a lot of races, and a lot more races than in 2024. And that does raise questions about what changed and maybe what changes we need to make going forward. I tend to be someone that thinks, let's look at where we are now and let's see how we can improve it going forward. So I've got a few ideas here. And so
Goud, before you go, I got another caller for you.
Oh, great.
John thanked you and I thanked him. We have Tracy. Hang on just a second. Let me let her know here. Tracy, are you there?
I am.
Good.
Go ahead. Hit Goud with a question or a comment.
So mine was more or less a comment. It was kind of probably similar to the previous caller, but I think the problem is with our county party is it's not functioning the way it's supposed to. The delegates aren't used the way they are supposed to. The precinct chairs aren't used as they're supposed to. It's just functioning as a shell. Because I even went to the county central committee on Saturday.
Yeah.
I just kind of tried to explain why he had a Democrat as a precinct chair or one of these executive chairs. And he said, well, it's hard for me to know who to trust. So it's hard for me to fill these positions. And he said, I don't know who to call when I need to get out the count my vote call. And I'm like, you call your delegates. What are you doing? Like, I don't understand. You don't know how the party's supposed to function. And to me, it's almost acting like a shell company or shell thing, because nobody helps. The delegates don't know. And sometimes precinct chairs don't even know that they're part of the central committee. So I think there's a disconnect, and that was kind of similar to your previous caller, but it definitely isn't functioning like a political party is supposed to function. And it's no wonder why we're not getting good candidates and they're not winning the races.
That's interesting. Do you think that, because I think you and I had talked about this before, but do you think that some of the delegates are not feeling inspired or unhappy with the direction of the party?
I definitely do. I have had a lot of people say they want to quit the party because it's worthless. And so I know a lot of independents, those people sit there because first of all, they're not happy with the direction of the Republicans. They don't want to be part of it, because even though the platform is a great platform and it says beautiful things that are inspired by God, and they don't want to be a part of it because that is not the reflection of the state. And who's running our state is Republicans. And the delegates don't want to even participate because now they just allow the state to violate laws and ignore our party nominees. So why would a delegate want to go sit for hours at any nominating convention if it doesn't count, because you're allowing the state to violate constitutional laws of our right to associate and pick our nominees the way we want to, and you're not standing up for the party. It's just a shell game to me. It's not real. The elections are controlled. So I think delegates don't want to help. They're like, this is pointless. Why would I go out and try to get out the vote for our candidate when the party isn't even functioning like it's supposed to? That's what I think part of it is. Why work hard for something that doesn't even, your voice doesn't even count in anymore?
Yeah, that's really interesting because there's just a couple points here. I feel like delegates actually get insulted a lot by the press and by people that are afraid. There's a lot of people that are ashamed to be a Republican or ashamed to be conservative, and so they insult delegates. And what I always found, because I ran for county clerk, is that actually delegates are they do deep dives into you as a candidate that a primary voter could never do and would never do. They won't dedicate the same time. And then also on your point about the support of these candidates, I do think that's difficult, right? Because the SB 54 thing, and I don't want us to get into that piece of it, but I do think that does make it makes it more difficult, because if you're a delegate, you go to convention, you get somebody above that 60%, and then they have to go up in a primary and they lose. I could see you turning around and saying, I just wasted 20, 30 hours of my time going through and asking these candidates tough questions, going to their events. Because when I ran, both times I have run for office, delegates show up to multiple events and they show up with follow-up questions and they think about stuff. And I mean, they ask you the toughest questions you'll ever be asked. And I could see that being very frustrating if you're a delegate.
Well, so can I add something to that, Goud? This Mr. Producer here. 100, 150, 200 hours, not just 10 or 20. I'm a delegate. I spent tons of time. Tracy spent we spend tons of time because we feel as a citizen, we're contributing and it's important. And then we get shunned. We get whatever. Yeah.
And the other thing is, I wonder if the Utah Republican Party seems to be a little bit ashamed of its Trump support, right? I mean, Trump actually won a higher percentage of the vote this time than Governor Cox did. But we have a lot of the Republicans here are a little bit soft. And so instead of embracing the Trump agenda, which is actually very popular, even in the state, 58%, 59% of Utah voters voted for it. They want Trump's policies implemented. We should be proud of that.
Hard to get 60% of the population to agree on anything. Good luck with that. And they agreed on it. Okay. Go ahead, Tracy.
Right.
You had another. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just had another point to that. About us being soft in Utah. It's really weird. So the way people think, because I had a comment in one of these chats that I'm in, and the representative, they weren't my representative, but I was pointed in my comments about how this election went down and how I feel like it was stolen because they broke law all the way around it. And I was pointed and she thought that was kind of rude towards her. And she said, well, you're not going to get any help if you talk to me like that. And I wanted to say, no. I don't have to kiss your butt in order for you to do what's right and uphold the Constitution. In fact, I'm your boss. It's not the other way around. But a lot of people think, oh, no, you've got to be nice all the time because you've got to get something done. No, you should hold them accountable. It's our duty to protect our freedom. And if that comes across pointed and blatant, so be it. Because some people are really passionate about their freedom and have watched people up on that hill pass bill after bill, and they don't even know what's in them. And they've passed bills that are going to take our freedoms away. including your religious freedom. And so, yes, when you see an election stolen by an incumbent governor and a lieutenant governor, you get a little pointed with your comment. And I do not know why it's this belief that once they get in, we have to kiss their feet and their rings in order for us to get anything done. It's just mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, I've noticed. No, 1 second. Let me just say this. You're listening to the Goud Crowd on KMMU, Mainstream Media, Utah. And you can watch or listen on YouTube, X, Rumble, and our website, kmmu.org. So thanks for listening and call in. But just to your point, Tracy, yeah, I do find that a lot of our elected officials tend to be overly sensitive, and it is really bizarre. I know you know, like this last time when I ran for the state house, people kept saying I was contentious and negative or something, and I was just like, I get stuff done. I don't understand what you're talking about. I'm not even mean to anybody. I just, like,
yeah,
you actually, and when a bill, and the thing is like when I go and testify, and I think this applies to you as well, when I go to the Hill and I testify on bills, if I don't like the bill, it's not 100% where I want it to go. I don't sit here and go, oh, this bill is perfect, it's great, blah, blah, blah. I actually point out the problems with it. And I say, look, we'll support this bill because we're trying to get to a goal. So for example, I want men to be categorically banned from women's bathrooms. We didn't get 100% to where we needed to be on that. We still supported the bill, but every time I testified, I pointed out, look, this isn't the bill we want, but we're supporting it because it will be a huge improvement over the status quo. And for some reason, some of the legislators get mad about that, but I'm like, it's not my job to try to make you look good. That's your job. You do that. My job is to try to get the best policy possible to try to, in this case, protect girls from men showing up in their bathrooms or locker rooms. But it applies to all sorts of other bills as well. So.
Oh, come on, you two. We have to disagree better, regardless of principle.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the trick. You're right on that, Goud, because the bills that they pass, some of it's really, really good, but there's always a small part that just hurts you, like the religious freedom one. It is titled beautiful and it says all the right things until you get to one spot, and it says the government may have a good enough reason to ban your religious freedom. And I pitched a fit over it, and my representative, my House representative at the time, he was a lawyer, and he goes, oh, this makes it better. I go, no, you're going to make it so that we have to sue, and nobody can afford to sue. And he said, well, you always have to sue. So that's an attorney response. And I thought, no, we don't. We only do when you write bad laws that violate our freedom.
Yeah. Interesting. I know who you're talking about. I think he's my rep too.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, thanks for calling in. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Let me go through this. So I just want, before we are finished, and if anybody else wants to call in, please do. What I have is some questions or ideas maybe on how to improve our ability to win races in Salt Lake County. One of the questions we need to answer is, are our candidates getting the proper support? And so I want to go back to this issue with Aaron Ryder and what I thought was a great issue about deferred maintenance of buildings and facilities by Salt Lake County, because what that does is it means that our facilities are not lasting as long as they should. And then we're having to get tax increases to go and buy new buildings or move facilities and all this kind of stuff that would not have happened if the government had properly maintained its buildings. Now, I'm wondering if the problem here is that Aaron, I think candidates had to file to run in January. I'm pretty sure that's right. So, but just think about this. You filed to run in January. She had to run in the convention. So that happened in, was it April? in April. And then the next after that, in Erin's case, she won at convention, but then there's going to be a primary in June, and so people are going to be preoccupied with that. And then the candidate has from then until November to start laying these issues out for voters so that they understand what the problem is, or they have identified the issue, they understand the problem, and how this candidate is going to solve it. And I think if we expect candidates to be the ones to actually identify all the issues and then expose them, come up with their solution, and do it in that what is really a short period of time, it just seems unfair to me, especially if it hasn't already been, if we haven't laid the groundwork for them to be able to come and make the case to voters. And so what I would suggest is that maybe our party leadership needs to have more engagement with the press continuously. Right now, a lot of the engagement with the press tends to be when there's a problem. So if you remember, after the caucuses in March, the party leadership was talking to the press, but it was because they had to explain how things went wrong during the caucus and the problems that happened about people signing in and things like that. But what we're missing, I think, is kind of identifying issues continuously with various offices and engaging with the press on those issues. So I would say we need to have a party chair who is writing op-eds continuously, who is talking to journalists and feeding them stories as his delegates, to Tracy's point, as his delegates go and find stuff. I mean, like I do the weekly rundown and I go and I try to identify issues, but I can't do it all. Like I'm one person. So I do have people that send me stories and they'll send me ideas, which is helpful. But some of this should be going to the party chair, who can then have people and volunteers develop the stories and then go to members of the press that he or she should have a relationship with and help them develop the story. Because a lot of the stories that come out, it's not just that journalist going and gathering all the information. People help them develop the stories. And like part of it is you're going to try to make the story sexy, and you're going to help them expose it. They want exclusive stories. Oh, we got callers. Okay.
Well, I just wanted to add, this is why we're here, Goud. This is why KMMU is here. Okay, so that we can combat the media maybe a little bit. All right. So you're singing my song.
Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, so I mean, that's why, yeah, exactly. That's a great point. That's why we're here at KMMU, to try to expose more of these stories. But it would be helpful if the party is doing it, because the party is thinking about how to win races all the time. That should be their goal, right? So, for example, this election's over, fine. But 2026 is coming up. And there's going to be big marquee races that I know that the Republican Party wants to win. It's your district attorney's office, your sheriff's race, and the county clerk, right? We need to be setting the foundation for candidates so that when they come forward and remember, these candidates, you're putting it all on the line. I can't even tell you, like, well, I can tell you, not that I can't tell you, but like, when I ran for clerk, I had run an election integrity committee with no intention of ever running for office. After 2020, seeing how poorly that election was run nationwide, I wanted to get involved. And Chris Null, the Salt Lake County GOP chair, asked me to run this election integrity committee. And, a group of us did a deep dive into that election system. We made tons of grandma requests. We interviewed people. We took tours of the ballot processing facilities. We ended up drafting a report, and that report, I think, is actually the biggest, I would say, the best independent source of news about our election.
I got a caller.
Oh, cool. Put him in.
Yeah. This is Natalie. Yeah. Natalie, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Go ahead.
Hey, Goud, I was listening to this
conversation. I thought this was a really good topic about how the parties can help the delegates. Help the candidates, and I'm glad that you're talking about this. I think this is an important thing to be doing.
Yeah. What do you? I think I know who you are. So what do you have to say, Natalie?
Okay. Yeah. I have a lot of thoughts on this. I ran with Phil Lyman, so I was his lieutenant governor, and we are really grateful for the party, the support that we did get, and we know it is very critical to have the party support, especially because as people probably know, Phil was the convention winner. He got nearly over two-thirds of the vote, and so that shows that he was the one who most represented the party platform after being vetted by delegates. And as the convention winner, we rely on the party to give us the support to go forward against the signature gatherers. And there are things that we are happy about, and some things that I think could be fixed in the future. But I have a big list. I don't know, Goud, if I'm supposed to go into all this stuff, but we were.
Go ahead, Natalie. Vent away.
Yeah, but pick a couple of like good big ones.
Yeah, this is on my mind. Flyers. We're grateful. A lot of counties put out flyers showing who had been vetted and went through convention. We thought that was super helpful. Salt Lake County, I know, did that. Utah County did it. We helped pay for some of those flyers that went out, but we were grateful to kind of help other convention winners by contributing towards some of those flyers that went out through Salt Lake County. Utah County and other counties did it too. So that was, I think, a really great thing that the party can do is to say these are the people who were vetted. So that was good. One frustration is, I don't know how many people know this, but we were supposed to get the email database from the party so that we could reach out to our membership, and we were severely limited in the amount of the information we were given. So this whole state, we got about 20,000 emails, and we are told that there's about 1 million or more emails that we could have had access to. I don't know why they didn't support us and give us the rest of the emails. We asked for those a lot of times.
Those are secret, Natalie. As a data guy, and I will tell you, the GOP does not have as big a database as should exist, and most people do not put their email on their voter registration for good reason. But yeah, I don't think the data that the GOP has is all that great. Go ahead.
That's the story that we were told too, but I do know that they made a big effort at caucus night to have us pre-register and to give email addresses. So they did get a lot more this year, and from some of the internal conversations we've heard that there is a lot more than 20,000 emails that we were given. So that's something that we feel like they should help us out more. But that's what they were telling us too, is we don't have as many as you think we have.
Well, and whose fault is that? They should have them all. Okay, we need to be able to communicate with the voters. Go ahead.
Right, because your convention winner is at a disadvantage against others. And then one of the biggest things I think the party can do in the future is, since we work so hard on getting these delegates and we have them do all this vetting and everything, and then because of this SB 54 route, people are able to just get signatures and bypass the whole process. But then the party doesn't even have access to view these signatures, and they've never been so protected like they were this year. It's just really remarkable that we weren't able to view these signatures. But I'd like to see the party take a more active role in the future and say, if they're going to bypass, if they want an R next to their name and they're bypassing our entire convention caucus system, we need to be able to make sure that these signatures are at least legitimate and to be able to see those. So I'm hoping that the GOP, through either the audit committee or other areas, are more involved in being able to help verify those signatures are legitimate.
Yeah, I actually think that's a great point. I mean, and I'll just say, generally, we need more transparency in our election system, and this is just one piece of that. So it is crazy that really, that 40% of those signatures are just not viewable by anybody, or 40% of those voters, we have no idea who they were. And there have been a lot of problems around signature gathering because we pay people, or these candidates, actually not we, pay people per signature. And I think they end up getting there's multiple cases of criminal activity with signature gatherers. So I agree with you 100% on that.
Yeah, I think it's a big problem. But the thing that was so interesting in this race too is because of the code right now says those withheld signatures are not able to be viewed, which I agree that totally should be changed. That should not be something we have in Utah. But it says that the private names should be viewed by both the candidates and the political parties, and that's why they're set apart differently than the withheld, because certain people have access to it. But then when we went and asked for those private names, they said we can't give you private names. And then I know that there were members of the State Central Committee of the GOP who went in and asked the same thing, and they were told the same thing: we can't give you these private names. So it doesn't make sense we're seeing. So I guess our situation has been interesting because we're seeing areas where we don't feel the state code has been followed by the lieutenant governor, who is our opponent and who also is overseeing the election. And so in that case, we think that the GOP really should stand up and support their candidates and the process when we're seeing it being violated, to be at least at a minimum to use their voice and say, this is not right. Like, we should have been able to. We are a political party. We should be privy to these private names. That the state code allows for that. The candidates should also, the candidate who's our convention winner should also be privy to these names, and those are not being followed appropriately. So I know the GOP don't have the enforcement ability, but they can definitely use their voice and say that these things are not happening the right way.
Yeah.
Well, and my opinion on, if someone signs a petition, they are making themselves known publicly in order to do that. If they didn't want to be known, they shouldn't sign the petition. So I mean, it's an excuse. Oh, these are. Wait a minute, the guy signed. He wants it to be known that he's in favor of this or that, or not in favor. It's a public announcement, and it's being hit across.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And in the code, there's about 3 different types of petitions listed, and I'm not aware of any others that are concealed from the public. So it should be treated like any other petition. It's identified in code as the nomination petition is identified with these other petitions to create a school district or petitions to create a new municipality. That information is not concealed from the public, so it doesn't make sense with this one that's even more critical and more important to the public that this is the one that they hide from everyone.
Good. Well, no, I mean, that makes sense. Thank you for calling in, Natalie. I appreciate the call. Those are helpful for sure. Okay, so I think now we actually had a candidate call in, and it sounds like, so our first question, are candidates getting the support they need? It looks like the answer is no. I thought kind of a really interesting point about that was, I don't know how a statewide candidate only gets 20,000 emails from the state party. I doubt that's all the emails that they have. And so, and let's say that those emails are held by a vendor, I would think that you would actually maybe you would pay for the candidate to be able to use that vendor to send out emails, or find some other way to get those emails to the candidate, because 20,000, only getting 20,000 emails in a state of 3.5 million people is absolutely useless. So that's a little bit crazy. So I was saying earlier, though, that in terms of messaging, I think what we want is we want to have the party leaders constantly interacting with our press and getting messaging out. And you've got to go to, you have to go to press that is actually not friendly. So you have to go to the Salt Lake Tribune, because there's a bunch of people, especially in Salt Lake County, who read it. And I'll be honest with you, I have a subscription. I get the veteran subscription, so it's super cheap. But because you have to. They are the biggest newspaper here. You do have to keep track of what's going on. So also, you want to go on the radio shows, all the radio shows. So like just as an example, when I ran for county clerk, I went on Radio from Hell. I got there. I mean, they have BLM flags up, like trans flags up. They're hostile. Like typically when you go into an interview, you'll talk to the people interviewing you, have like some banter back and forth. They might tell you like, oh, we're going to talk about general topics, right? Like we're going to talk about this, we're going to talk about that. When I got to this Radio from Hell interview, I said to them, oh, hey guys, how are you? What are you guys thinking in terms of talking about? And they were like, you'll find out when we start asking questions after the commercial break's over. So, but you have to do interviews like that, because part of it is developing a relationship with them and just having the skill set to do it. Because if you're a Republican, the reality is unless you're like a liberal Republican, like Amy Winder Newton, let's say, you're not going to get friendly press from the mainstream media. So you have to be able to actually go onto these shows and make the point. And so I think our party leadership should be everywhere all the time. So they should be in the Tribune. They should be in Deseret News. They should be on that. There's that guy on Sundays. I can't remember his show. It's really boring though. God, what is it called? He's paid a ton of money by the University of Utah. The Hinckley Report. I mean, if you want to talk about a boring show, boring. But these people that are in the know, they watch it. And so you got to think about that. And then I think our party needs to do a better job of cultivating alternative media in our state. So our party leadership should be going onto all the podcasts. They should be, they should be coming on the Goud Crowd. They should be going on political, I think it's called Political Headcase, something. Political Trauma, they should be going on the Michelle Tanner Show. Every single podcast, you should be going on it. You should be promoting people, because the way that we counter political head trauma. Thank you, producer. Political head trauma. I apologize to Jared and Holly. I didn't remember that. But like our job, I think as a party is to now cultivate these I'll call it alternative sources of media, but really, let's be real. A lot of our mainstream media is it's a form of propaganda. And so you want these alternative sources of media, because a lot of times they'll be telling you the truth. And I found this myself in my own world. In this last election, for example, my parents, my sister, and my brother-in-law all voted for Biden in 2020. And in 2024, all four of them voted for Trump. And one of the biggest things that changed their votes was getting access to true information and getting unhooked from mainstream media. And so I'll just give you an example with my parents. I always talk to them, obviously, and I'll talk about stuff from the conservative viewpoint, and then they'll ask for sources. And so I'll send them an X post or something. And it turned out that some of that had an impact, I think. But the biggest impact was they discovered Dr. Phil. And I would tell them something like, oh, in Utah, these men with mental health problems who are pretending to be women are allowed into women's bathrooms, right? And my mom would say, oh, is that real? I can't believe it. And then I'd be like, no, Mom, it's real. Trust me. And it's even worse in California. My parents are in California. So, but then Dr. Phil talked about it on the show. And my mother called me and was like, oh my God, I just saw Dr. Phil. He talked about it. It's crazy. And that stuff started turning her. She's now pretty Trumpy, and actually can defend Trump against people that attack him, which is crazy to me. The last time she voted Republican, I would say, is probably Reagan. That's how long it's been. With my sister and my brother-in-law, I actually think the trans agenda and learning about it is what turned them to vote for Trump. And specifically with, I have two nephews. My younger nephew, he has a tendency is where if he said he was straight, I think we'd all be surprised. And it's obviously not a big deal. In case you don't know this, I'm gay. And but they're in California, and so the concern is that at school they promote the trans agenda, and typically what they do is they actually target kids who don't fit the stereotypes of what they should act like for their sex. So if you have a boy who has some feminine tendencies, instead of just letting him be, like whatever that means, I have no idea what it means really. instead of just letting that be, they then start to tell them, oh, you're in the wrong body, you're supposed to be a girl. So like the boy likes pink, he likes dolls, something that's, well, you're in the wrong body, you're supposed to be a girl. When in reality, the majority of boys like that actually just grow up to be gay. They're men who are gay, and there's nothing wrong with that. And it's much, and in fact, I mean, they wouldn't think to be trans except people promote the agenda to them. So that issue turned my sister and brother-in-law. And so like, but it was learning the truth about this stuff, which they weren't learning in the mainstream media, because in the mainstream media, if you ask questions about the trans agenda, or say you don't want men in women's locker rooms or bathrooms, or you don't think boys should be playing girls' sports, you're a transphobe, right? You're a bad person. Well, you have to be able to overcome that. And when people learn the truth about what the trans agenda is, how it sexualizes your children at a young age, how it it is just evil to tell someone they're born in the wrong body. That type of, when people realize how bad it is, they turn against it. And then they turn against candidates who promote it. So, okay. Anyway, so the point is here, I believe our party leadership should be engaging with the press and setting the foundation so that candidates that the issues have already been laid out there, so citizens are paying attention to it. So to this issue with Aaron Ryder, I had never heard about this deferred maintenance issue, right? It's not a super sexy issue, although it could be, because again, like, I don't want my taxes to go up. I am tired of paying taxes. I would like them cut. So if you're wasting my money on all sorts of junk, but you're not paying to keep our buildings maintained, and so now we're gonna have to replace buildings sooner and my taxes are gonna go up, that's gonna get me worked up. But I wonder if that issue needed to have been exposed earlier than when Aaron decided to run. So it's not a criticism of Aaron at all. It's a criticism of our party for not identifying that issue sooner and laying the groundwork so that when she started to run, voters were like, oh yeah, I've heard of this issue. And I'm glad that you're running because you're going to help us solve it. Okay, and that's just one example of, I think, how party leadership can help identify issues, educate the public about them so that candidates can just step in and start to run. And of course, they'll have their own issues that they come up with, but they should have some basis to be able to run on. So now, as a party, I think we need to be thinking about issues for our big races coming up in 2026. And so I challenge all of you, like, think about what are the issues? What do you think is important? How do we win these various races? And you're going to have the district attorney, right, who's like a left-wing, he's a total left-wing guy, Sim Gill. You got your sheriff, right? I mean, she can now let trans women, really they're just men, go and stay in a women's prison if they meet certain requirements. The question is, how many of you let in to go to the women's prison? And whenever that happens, you know exactly where that leads, right? Like these men pretend to be women, they go into the women's prison and they rape these poor women. And it's so offensive and so disgusting. And you know that there's no woman in jail who's going to say she's a man and go into the men's prison. This is a one-way street. And so we should find out, right? We should find out right now. Has the sheriff allowed any trans women, also known as men, to go and stay in the women's prison? And if she has, we should expose the issue and set it up so that the person that runs in 2026 can be like, I will not let trans women, also known as men, go into the women's prison. Okay, that's kind of an example of how we do this. And the county clerk, because we need a better county clerk. We really do. And I think that there have been some improvements in our county clerk's office, but it's because citizens have come forward and she knows people are watching her, and we have exposed a lot of the bad stuff she did. Because our current county clerk was a deputy to Sherry Swenson. And as the person who led the election integrity committee, I can tell you, they were not doing a good job at all. When we started asking questions, everyone would say, oh, Sherry Swenson, she's this wonderful person. She's the Jesus of elections, the best person ever. And then literally start asking her questions and she gets prickly and nasty. So And it's because no one had asked her questions before. The press just reports, the mainstream media, not KMMU, just reports what the government tells them to report. Okay, and so for all of you out there who are delegates, let's start thinking about this. What are issues that we can identify and investigate and start setting up so that when we get good candidates who are willing to put it all out on the line in 2026, we've already laid the groundwork for them. Now, I also think, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, but we want to get candidates on X. And we need to have some of our bigger Republican X users be able to promote them so they get more followers. And I use Rochelle Morris as an example because, I mean, she just got more than 200,000 votes and she's only got 389 X followers. And what you have to understand is that the Democrats put Republicans on lists and then they will not follow you. And they'll tell other people not to follow you as well. It's a very purposeful effort to reduce your ability to communicate to the public. And if you're going to run for office, you're going to need a platform like that to be able to respond to press attacks. And it's really important. So I would say we need to have a party that has more followers on X, both the state and the county party. And then we also need to have, I guess, maybe influencers be willing to share these people's profiles when they start to run and to tell people, follow this person. This person's putting it all on the line for you. So follow them and help them get the word out. And then also I would say this, we need to encourage people in Utah to get onto X. I've noticed this thing where Governor Cox is constantly saying, get off social media. It's acerbic, right? And it's caustic, but I disagree. I actually want more people to get on X. And the reason is it's a free speech platform. It actually is, I think, the best source of truth that you can find. And I'll just say this, I don't know, like everybody needs to discern true and false information. It's on you to do that. I think that's one of the lessons of 2020 is like, don't just listen to media personalities. Don't just listen to journalists. Actually, you have to analyze everything they tell you, including me. I don't hold myself to any different standard. Like you should make your own judgments about what I'm saying. But we want people on X because it is a free speech platform, and it gives us the ability to hit stories that maybe the mainstream media won't hit. The Salt Lake Tribune, for example, is extremely sympathetic to the whole trans agenda. And if we want to counter that, we need to have an ability to do that through other media. And obviously you can come on this show and talk about that. You can talk about it from both perspectives. I have my view, but I'm happy to hear from both sides. But I think we want X so that the candidates can then respond, and then so that people can get the truth. And again, this is how you change people's minds. It's true information. I think we also need better engagement with different communities. And I don't just mean this to be, like these innate qualities, but just everything. Communities, gun owners, truck drivers, community events. I'll just say, like when I ran for clerk, I went to the Pride Festival and I had a booth there, and I was also in the Pride Parade. It's kind of a funny story, but I have a friend who was like, oh, I told this guy, I was like, oh, that's really cool that he's reaching out to the LGBTQIA plus minus community or whatever. And then he said, the guy was like, well, yeah, he's gay. Doesn't that make sense? And my friend said he was like, he's gay? I didn't know that. And I think that's just because during that race, I wasn't trying to make it an issue because I don't think it is really an issue. It come up in weird ways though. I remember Brian Schott interviewed me. As many of you know, he's kind of obsessed with me. And so he interviewed me, and during the interview, one of the things he said is, we talked about elections, and they said, well, what else do people ask you about? And I was like, well, they asked me if I'll issue marriage licenses to gay couples. And he said, well, will you? And then I responded, yeah, I'm gay. Why would I care? And then you could tell by his face he had no idea. which is kind of funny because I was like, you're a journalist, you do not do any research. All you do, I think if you Google me, you can figure it out. But, anyway, the point being is that we need to be at all these different community events. The Republicans should have tables at these events. We should have a table at the gun shows. There's a truck show that happens once a year, I think down in Lehigh. We should be at that event with the table. We should be at, events in Mill Creek, events in Salt Lake City. We should be at the Pride Festival, even though I'll be honest with you, so I don't even want to go to the Pride Festival anymore because some of that, unfortunately, it's turned into a big freak show. And when I was there, they even had the Satanic Temple had a booth, and people were getting unbaptized. And I just find that so offensive and ridiculous, and it makes us look bad. But I guess we should still be there doing outreach, and we should be at all these places with a table, and we should be talking to people about why it's good to be a Republican, why our issues are better for you. I mean, one of the most notable parts of the 2024 election is that the electorate has completely flipped, meaning this: college educated people are more Democrat than they are Republican. Working class people are more Republican. They are what's driving the Republican Party. We should be at all these events talking about this. And again, laying the groundwork for why it is always better to vote Republican. And so I would say that's another thing we need to be better at. I think another issue is, do we have all of the people we think are conservative registered to vote? And I know this is a big effort of Scott Pressler out in Pennsylvania, but I've been thinking about this for the past few days. But in my neighborhood, I live in Riverton, and like my next door neighbor, and I think some of his kids live with him, and they work in a factory, right? Are they all registered to vote? I don't know. I'm probably going to go ask them. Then there's some people in my neighborhood who are truck drivers. Are they registered to vote? I have no idea. But those are people that are much more likely to be a Republican. And we should be going and making sure that all these people are registered to vote and finding out where they are. I mean, maybe we go stand in front of the factories when people are going to work and offer to register to vote. Like, please register to vote. We want you to vote. We want to represent you. And we make sure that the people that are going to vote Republican are actually registered and are going to vote for us. And I will say, I was messaging with the legislator, because I think one thing we could do is have the Department of Wildlife Resources make voter registration a part of the process for getting your hunting and fishing license, right? Because hunters and fishers are probably going to be overwhelmingly Republican. And he said, well, registering them to vote doesn't mean they're going to vote. But in Utah, with mail voting, they will get a ballot. And I think that automatically increases the chances that they'll vote, right? It's an automatic, you'll get a ballot. So why wouldn't we take advantage of that? Why didn't we get our legislators to look at every place where more Republicans are likely to show up and make it part of the process that you're offered to the opportunity to register to vote? We do it at the DMV. So why wouldn't we do it through DWR and anywhere else where that the people there are going to be overwhelmingly Republican? Okay. Now, I think there's another question here, and that is that our party leadership, meaning the elected officials, may be a little bit of a problem here. And specifically, I think, Tracy kind of hinted at this or kind of talked about it, right? My producer says, stop vote by mail. Yeah, no, I know. I don't particularly care for vote by mail personally, but in this case, we have it. Unfortunately, more than 90% of voters use it, and so it's unlikely that we're going to get rid of it. So I think what we need to do is take advantage of it and use it to win. And that's, I like to win. As I said in an interview once, which people thought was a negative, but I like to win. So Governor Cox at the convention, he insulted the delegates, and he insulted conservatives. And then, he went on this apology tour around the state and talked to people and said, oh, I guess I'm a changed man or something like that, except there's no actual evidence that he has changed anything. Meaning this, if you're an elected official and you change your policies, right, you would fire somebody who was pushing the previous policies. And so let me give you an example. One of the biggest promoters of the trans agenda in Utah is Governor Cox. It is here and in all of our institutions because of him. Now he said, now, you know, and that's what led to him vetoing HB 11, which bans, well, it doesn't, I mean, it bans boys from playing in girls sports, except now it got stayed by a court. So there's a commission, so they can still get in. But the point is, he vetoed it and the legislature overrode it, but he vetoed it because he supported the trans agenda. And so now he's saying, I don't support it anymore. Okay, well, who advised you that that was a good idea? I want to see them fired. You know, he has a lot of left-wing people in his administration. His head of communications is Jennifer Napier Pierce, and she used to be the executive editor of the Salt Lake Tribune. So I guess I don't understand if you think that if you really are saying that you are now being more conservative, why would you have her as your communications director? Another example is Tracy Gruber, the head of the Utah's Department of Health and Human Services. I mean, she's a total left-wing person she's actually from Chicago, my hometown. And she came here and now she works for the government. She makes like $333,000 a year for that job. She's a lawyer, so that she does not need to be paid that kind of money for that job. She makes more than the governor. And she's not even very good at it. You know, like that Gavin Peterson died under her watch. And even though, and not only just died, he was tortured by his family. They starved him to death over months. And the DCFS, which is under her control, knew about it because they got multiple complaints from the Weber County School District. And they didn't do anything, and she's still there. So like, I would think you would at least fire her. That seems like a easy one, right? Instead, I see her, she's still showing up as now she's going to lead a task, or she's part of a task force to fight opioids. Well, what is she? I mean, she's not good at anything she does. Why would you want her leading in part of another task force? She's going to fail at that too, because all of these things that she's working on lead to people dying. And that one, and not even on a political level, just on a competence level, that one seems like you would fire her. He could just fire her and say, look, I am a different man today. I fired the head of my biggest agency. Won't even do that. And there are Republicans who, you know, I think Utah's culture tends to be a little bit too nice and a little bit gullible to me. That people tend, because they're so nice, they just believe when people say stuff. And, you know, like I said, I didn't grow up here. I'm not from here originally. And so I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, I question everything and everybody, and I don't believe elected officials. I don't think you should. And so to me at least, I don't believe Governor Cox has changed, and I won't believe him until he actually takes some action that shows it, and it requires firing some people. So the point being, though, is I think him insulting conservatives like he did probably turned off a lot of people. You know, he got fewer votes this time, significantly, like 180,000, I think, something like that. Fewer votes than he got in 2020. Now, some of that was because of Phil Lyman's writing campaign, but the reality is that those people would not have voted for Phil Lyman if they thought Governor Cox was doing a good job. He was the Republican on the ballot. So I think we need leadership and people that are in elected office who do not turn around and insult delegates, right? That's totally inappropriate. And it's just not right. So, and it hurts on multiple levels, because keep in mind, if you're running for office, the people that'll end up being your volunteers will come out of that delegate corps. So when I ran for clerk, I had a bunch of people. I had a lot of volunteers. The vast majority of them were people that met me during the convention process, and they liked me as a candidate. Some of them supported me, some of them didn't. But they learned about me and they liked me, and they came and they volunteered. And I would just say, like, we need more, when you're nice to delegates, or when you treat them with respect, which is what they deserve, that's how they treat you. But when you treat them like Governor Cox does, you're just going to turn off these delegates who, like the producer said, he spent whatever 100 hours doing this, right? Oh, let me tell you. So just so you know, you're listening live to the Goud Crowd on KMMU, Mainstream Media, Utah. And so you can watch or listen to us on YouTube, X, Rumble, and our website. It says kmmu.org. So thanks for listening, and call in. You can call in if you want. I'm just going to go. I just got a couple more things, but if you call in, I will stop talking because I can loop back to where I was. But anyway, so the point is, these delegates they're the heart of our party. And I don't think they should be insulted. I think we should treat them with respect. When the media tries to attack them, we should counter the media. A lot of times they're like, oh, the delegates are extremists. This is a big one I hear. No, they're not. They actually spent hours and hours and hours vetting these candidates and asking them the tough questions that the primary voters will never get to ask. And you won't be able to ask because a lot of times, especially like I can tell you right now, I cannot name for you an event that Governor Cox held after the convention stuff. Literally, I looked at his schedule. It was like nothing. He just pop up here and there, but it was all for like controlled audiences. The delegate process is not controlled. You get people asking you all sorts of questions. I mean, you can't. No primary voter, no general election voter will ever have that type of access or the ability to vet like a delegate does. And I wish more people understood that, because I think what the press does is they insult the delegates and they try to minimize them, because the biggest danger, because the press attacks on delegates don't work because they've met all the elected officials, right? And the people running.
I don't have a caller, but I wanted to just add this, because people go, oh, this delegate process, it's undemocratic. It's just a few people making selections. But those few people go out and work and try to understand and meet with the delegates. I can't tell you how many what do you call the little meetings that we call them? It's like a town hall.
Cottage meetings.
Cottage meetings. How many cottage meetings I went to? I talked to every delegate, and I talked to every candidate, and I mean, it's a lot of work. The average guy doesn't have the capability to do that. And I was told, oh, well, it's just a minority who's running things. And I'm going, yeah, but these are people who are out there interested, engaged, and working on trying to figure out who the best delegates are.
Yeah.
So I get a little incensed when people say, oh, you're just a minority and it's undemocratic. I'm going, really? When I moved to Utah and I found out about the whole delegate system and the caucus, I went, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Yeah.
And the media opposes it because it's democratic. Democracy. Okay. Anyway, sorry. I just had to interject. Thanks.
No, thank you. Thank you. No, and I think that's a great point, because actually, I really think part of it is that the media can't influence the delegates, because the delegates, if you tell the delegates something, I had a delegate ask me when I ran for the state house, and she said, I heard you're anti-Semitic because you attacked George Soros. So I was like, okay, can I respond to that? And we ended up having a conversation about it, because I said, look, I don't care what religion George Soros is or ethnicity. I attacked him because he and his rich friends spent $180,000 in Utah making racist flyers about me where they darkened my photo with a bunch of fake information in it. And they mailed it to a ton of people in Salt Lake County, including everybody that I worked with. So yeah, I attacked him. And I am just a middle-class, normal guy who got attacked by a billionaire. And by the way, I'm also a minority, right? I'm like a racial minority. I'm gay. I'm a veteran. So like you're worried about the billionaire who I can't do anything about him, but you're not worried about the regular guy. Well, at the end of it, she actually said, oh, okay, I understand that. That makes sense to me. Yeah, I see that. Like, I can totally understand why you would attack George Soros, because he has bad policy again, and he totally smeared you. That's ridiculous. So, but that can, normal people aren't going to be able to have that back and forth. You listen to the media, but you're not going to be able to ask the candidate questions like that. And that could be a very uncomfortable question to be asked as a candidate, right? Because, like your automatic response when somebody accuses you of something like that is to be defensive. But really, what you find is that if you actually talk to people, you can get past that and make them understand like your perspective and why it wasn't what they thought it was. So anyway, I think we need to have elected officials who actually are willing to defend the delegates. And I'll just add one more story to this. During the 2022 election, when I ran for clerk, I had lunch with the League of Women Voters. And it was really an interesting lunch because you would think typically they're officially nonpartisan, but a lot of them are a little bit more to the left. I think they do good work. So I'm not taking away from that, but it was an interesting lunch though, because they commented that they were impressed with the convention process that led to me becoming the nominee, right? Because it was such an issue-based campaign. So they actually came away from that seeing what had been exposed in that campaign. It wasn't really a personality one. It was really about hard issues and I understood the election system probably deeper than anyone else, except maybe a county clerk, but really like I know what they know. And so I thought that was really interesting. They actually complimented the delegate system. So, that's something to think about. So the group that's probably a little bit more left-leaning, they were impressed with what the delegate system did. Another point is, and this will be my last point, I also think the GOP spends a lot of time attacking its own, and especially attacking like delegates, which I think is kind of weird. And let me give you an example here. Before the election happened, the Salt Lake County GOP, and this is public, it's not on X, but they actually removed one of the members from the state central committee. So one of the representatives of Salt Lake County on the state central committee. And so to me, it just seems like that was not, maybe you needed to do it. I'm not saying yes or no on that. What I'm saying more is like, maybe that should wait until after elections so that you can deal with issues like that when there's time to, and not during the election season when everybody should be focused on trying to win these races. So and let me just add one more thing back on this delegate issue, and it's this. And going back to kind of what Tracy was talking about, these delegates spend a lot of time and effort vetting candidates, and then to see the opposing, or to see someone gather signatures and circumvent the process and then go and win. I think like a lot of them, some of the delegates get turned off by those candidates. So I heard from multiple people, this surprised me by the way. So just that's told me that they didn't vote for Rochelle Morris, right? And because they thought she wasn't conservative enough, or they thought she was too attached to Becky Edwards or something. But I thought it was interesting because, in that's not even a signature gathering case. Yeah, she gathered signatures, I think, but she didn't need them because she ended up with less than 60% of the vote, and Mike Carey, her primary opponent, ended up with a little bit more than 40%. So this was a totally legitimate win as the primary person, and something broke there. So maybe my point with this one is we need to look at the process and making sure that the delegates are staying engaged throughout it, no matter who wins at the end, especially if, like, I understand the point. Some people are saying, look, if you gathered signatures and you circumvented our process, I'm not going to support you in the general election. Okay, that seems more legit to me. But in this case of the at-large county council seat, where it was not a signature gathering issue, we got to figure out how we get our candidates across the finish line and keep delegates engaged with them. So I think those are my suggestions about what we need to do going forward. If we've got a few phone calls today. If you guys have any thoughts, I guess you can comment on this on X. I do read it, and I'll take a look at it, because maybe it's something we could talk about during the weekly rundown or in a future podcast or radio show as well. And because I do think this is an issue. If we do it right going forward, I believe we can flip races in Salt Lake County. And I actually think that's really important because we want to, what's going on right now is dangerous because Salt Lake County keeps trending blue, as I showed you in that map in the beginning. And what that'll do is you'll kind of see it at the edges first, right? I saw something recently where someone said Bountiful actually turned more left this election, right? Well, Bountiful is very close to Salt Lake County. And so it'll bleed out like that. Like the blue just keeps growing and growing. And we want to shrink that back. So, and I believe that when people understand the issues and they know the truth about them, that they actually will turn more Republican or more conservative, like I was saying with my own family members. Because like on that, for example, on that trans agenda, this is actually another example of an issue that our party tends to be a little bit afraid of, right? It's the Republicans who stood up and protected girls' sports, okay? It's the Republicans who restricted the ability of men with mental health problems to go into women's bathrooms and locker rooms. It's not the Democrats. 0 Democrats vote for those bills. So, but they don't run on those issues. They don't go and tell voters, I protected your daughters, right? I protected your daughters from being exposed to a boy in the locker room or being exposed to a boy in the bathroom. A lot of times I think they think it's not nice to talk about this issue because Utah does have a lot of trans kids, quote unquote trans kids. I think a lot of, they have gender dysphoria. I think a lot of this is because of social issues and the promotion of it in the state, which I've never seen anything like it before, and the niceness piece of it. See, I'll just give you an example. I had a family member, you might be able to guess who it was, but son came home, says, oh, am I supposed to be a girl? Family member says, no, that's not a real thing. I birthed you. You were a boy. You will always be a boy. You can never change it. Get that nonsense out of your head. So that's a very Indian way of handling this. Like if you ever met my parents when I was a kid, they are very, very blunt. It's very Indian culture. Like if you come out, your hair looks bad, mom will be like, your hair looks terrible, go fix it now. You know, like she's not gonna be nice about it. Or your teeth look yellow, go brush your teeth, this type of stuff. So that is how Indian culture works. But I think LDS culture is much nicer. And so from what I see, at least, it seems like a child here comes home and says something like that, and the parents feel like they can't just be like, that's nonsense. Total, utter nonsense. Get it out of your head. Instead, it's, being nice about it. And I think that makes it more difficult. So, but I think as a party, when we're the ones on the right side of these issues, right? So keeping pornographic books or trying to get pornographic books out of school, trying to protect girls' sports, trying to protect girls from boys and girls and women. So it's also your wives and your sisters and your mothers from being exposed to men in the bathrooms and locker rooms. We should proudly run on that issue. I think you'll actually drive a lot more voters to come to us and say, hey, you know what? I have a daughter. I don't want her to be exposed to a boy. I want her to be able to compete fairly. I don't want her to be in a boy's locker room. Or I'm sorry, not in a girl's locker room and have a boy walk in on her, right? So anyway, that's part of what our party needs to be also more proud to be conservatives and proud about the good bills that we pass. I don't think all the bills are good, but at least the ones that are really good, run on them. Be proud. Tell people I'm the protector of your daughters. I'm the one that's going to protect your wives, your daughters, your mothers. And I think that producers come back on.
No, we don't have a caller. I just wanted to say thank you very much. We're coming to the end, but this whole thing, the culture is changing. We used to get canceled for being right-wing radicals, okay? And I always thought that was funny because a radical is the left. The rights they have a whole different term for that, but I've always been in the center, and I see these things going on, and it just doesn't make sense. And I think it's changing. I think things are coming around. The pendulum's swinging. We'll put it that way. Okay. And you need to tell everyone where they can reach you, Goud. I see you on. I love your Instagram. I love that. And then X and I don't know where else.
Facebook.
Probably Facebook. Yeah. So
Yeah.
let them know. Let them know.
Okay. Okay, everybody. Well, we are at the end here, so it's been a pleasure. And yeah, you can find me. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and X. My handle is @Goud4Utah, and I will say this. So, sorry, Goud, Goud, the number 4 Utah.
Oh,
and I'll just say
have
this.
a caller, if you want to take one more call, we have a couple of.
Yeah, put them through.
I'll bring him on. Keep talking. I'll bring him on. Hang on.
Okay, and I'll just say this: like, I'm most active on X, so if you want the best stuff, go to X. Let's see who we got. No. Okay. Yeah, because I tend to be very active on X. It's a little bit harder on Facebook and Instagram. I think on Instagram, you need like photos and stuff. And even though I'm a really handsome guy, I don't put a lot of photos up. For those of you who don't know, it's a joke. Well, I have to. Yeah.
We have Paul on the line. It's going to be your
okay.
last call. And Paul, go ahead. Fire away.
Hey, Goud. First time listening, and just wanted to say thank you so much for doing something alternative media-wise. I've been really disappointed with local media coverage of local political issues. And yeah, just on the trans kids issue in Utah, I'm LDS, and I just wanted to comment that part of the issue with what we're seeing with Utah going from like the most traditional family value state to having, I think it was a fifth of the kids at LDS church now identify as like non-binary or trans from what I've seen.
Oh,
a lot
wow.
of this is down. A lot of it is, and this may offend a lot of Utahns because they like to be nice and not talk about what's going on, but the LDS church collaborates a lot with some of these gay activists, these, I guess, trans activists, I would say, and they've become very soft. In the LDS Church Handbook of Policies, since 2019, they've been letting dudes who dress up like women attend Relief Society meetings, which is like where the women attend and have like their own meetings. There's been men in the women's bathrooms in LDS chapels throughout the state. They recently kind of pulled back a little bit on that. But yeah, I think a lot of it is top down, and people are just putting their heads in the sand. And I think that's like a big part of the issue with Utah is the LDS Church has a lot of power. I'm a member, and I've just noticed that they're kind of going along to get along with some of the cultural issues. And I just hope people start waking up, because I have family from out of state, and they'll come visit here, and they're just shocked at how there's more like Pride Progress flags displayed here than anywhere else in the country. It seems like Utah just really isn't what it was even like 10 years ago. So that's kind of all I wanted to comment on, and just tell you thanks, because KSL, which is owned by the church, is, I think, the biggest media outlet in the state, and they will not touch these issues, and they become very biased. Even with the woman, I think there was like a woman who transitioned, and they had a story about it, and she was like made out to be a man, and then there's like a man who went on a kind of like a crime spree down in St. George and murdered someone, and they just cover up this. Yeah, it just makes me sick.
Oh yeah, no, I know what you're talking about. And they refer to that person as a boy or a man or whatever instead of as a girl or a trans boy or something.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for just doing this media thing. I think I'll tune in when you keep doing it. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Paul, and thanks for your comment. I appreciate you listening and appreciate you calling in. Keep doing it. Okay, I'll just close out by saying this. It's an interesting observation by Paul, and I'll just say this: I actually think the LDS Church has some pretty amazing doctrine. And one of the things, I'm not LDS, but I've read the Family Proclamation, and I gotta say, it's a very beautiful document. And families are really important, and I wish, I wish more people believe that. So, and I will just say this: I think the trans agenda is actually aimed at undermining those family units. So, I'll leave you with that, and we'll be back next week. So tune in. And if you, in the meantime, though, as I said, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and X, and my handle is @Goud, Goud, the number 4 Utah, and the place I am the most active is on X. So thanks for tuning in, and thanks for calling in, and we will see you next time.